Hi. It is noon on Wednesday Pacific, 3 o'clock Eastern, and that means, and I'm Janet Fitch. Um, so that means that this is Writing Wednesday, where I answer your writing questions, your philosophical questions, technical questions, craft questions, existential questions. Um, Feel free to ask me questions in the chat, and I'm happy to answer you if you're on here live. And if you have questions for me during the week, send them to me through my website, janetfitchwrites.com, and I can answer your writing questions. I can make a whole Writing Wednesday around your questions. So feel free. I know if you have questions, if you're struggling with something, believe me, there are plenty of people who are struggling with the same thing because, you know, the writing process is what it is, and you're not the only one. Beginner through, you know, published 16 books, we're all facing the same questions. So, welcome today. Um, I have questions today from the interwebs, and they seem to be about style. Maybe people, because it's summer, midsummer, and people are on vacation and reading things that excite them, or taking a look at their own writing and going, "What's maybe missing with this?" Um, we talk about a lot about character, we talk a lot about structure, we talk a lot about description, we talk about the elements of story, scene and sequence, scene and story, but style is something that I, you know, I won't say it comes last. Um, it's something that is very close to the author in a way that you almost don't see it, like swimming, like a fish in water, that it's there, it's essential, and yet it's hard to grab. Hi, Marie. Hi, GB. Nice to see you. Um, so I got two questions. So that always tells me that it seems to be going around. Um, so the first one is, do you like to write fiction in the manner of a style of another author? So do you like to write in a style of another author? Um, I think it was something that I did a lot as a younger person because you're looking for your own voice. You're looking for, you know, most of us start as readers, so we are looking at these great novelists that we can't even imagine how they got that on the page. Because I mean, for myself, I didn't study writing. I come in from left field. I had to learn it all myself, and I would just take copy a paragraph into my journal. I'd copy a paragraph of, say, Melville, just to see what it felt like to write that paragraph. I have to do it through my hands, through, you know, hi Jill. I have to do it through my hands, through typing or for with a pen, for me to really learn anything. I have to do it. It's not enough. Don't show me how to fix a faucet. Give me the wrench and tell me as I'm doing it. I need to do it with my hands. Hi, Sarah. Jill. We So I liked when I was learning. I certainly copied people's sentences. I copied people's paragraphs, just pretending. What if I had written that? How would it feel to write that Faulkner sentence? And I do not think that this is a bad thing. Many people in this conversation on the internet were saying, I write in my own style. I would never imitate anybody else. Um, And I think that um, kind of misunderstands the reader that became the writer, that we are attracted to certain writing. And it's not just the plot, it's not just the characters. We are affected by the voice of the writer. I mean, most of us will, when we go out to buy a book, um, the writers among us, which I think you guys are, um, will read a little bit, and we're looking for the voice. What is the voice of it? Because you can't get the story in a couple of paragraphs, a little brief dip, but you certainly get the idea of how that writer creates a sentence, how they create a sound, how they create an ambiance, kind of their room tone. If you've ever done any recording, um, and so I advise people as I when I'm teaching, um, I assign it. I pick people who are strong stylists, that whose style, whose voice you cannot miss. Um, because blandness of style is something that um, there are many, many more books published than ever before. I think most writers are aware of that. Um, but to have a pronounced style is still um, a rare thing. And when an editor or an agent sees a pronounced style on the page, it draws attention, because most of what they see, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of submissions, have no style. They have no flavor. They're like oatmeal, you know? And then you get one tangy thing with salsa on it. It's like, wow, that is interesting. That is tasty. So it's not that we're going to focus on style to the exclusion of story and character and dialogue and stuff, but it is part of the mix. And the best way to enter into that conversation um, is to find some people with a really strong style. Try to copy out a sentence, copy out a paragraph or a page, because you're going to play with this, and then study it and ask yourself, what marks that style? What am I seeing? How is that created? Um, is it and it is take a look at word choice, level of diction, length of the sentences, variety in the length of the sentences, and syntax, the way they organize a sentence. Where do they put dependent clauses, or do they? What kind of connectors? Do they use compound sentences, and, or are they using dependent clauses? Do they use a uh, dependent clause that begins a sentence, an introductory clause? Do they use introductory clauses? It gives the reader the feeling that um, the writer already knows the story, so that they can introduce, and I, as blah, 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 was blah, 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 comma, then they did it. So you know enough about your story ahead of time that you can write an introductory clause. Um, are the sentences short? Are they long? Do they vary? Um, I recommend, like, when I teach a style class, the sentence class, I usually have people take a favorite author with a pronounced style. So you have to be honest with yourself. Does your favorite author have a pronounced style or not? And if they don't, find one that does, that you're interested in investigating. And then what you do is you take their paragraph, and you write your own paragraph using that paragraph as a template. So wherever they use a dependent clause, you use a dependent clause. The length of the sentence stays the same. The order of adjectives and nouns and verbs stays the same. But you use your own language to fill that template. And then you're going to get an idea of what it's like to write like Henry James, what it's like to write like David Foster Wallace, what it's like to write like Cormac McCarthy. And then you can interrogate the page of what are they doing that makes that voice so strong. Often it's vocabulary, it's word choices, um, crunchy words, interesting words. Um, but often it's the music, which is about, it's in the sentence. It's like, how do they connect their thoughts? How do they organize their syntax? What's the music of that writer? Because that's what we're talking about when we talk about style. You can think of it as a music, you can think of it as a scent, but I like music because it's rhythmic, the rhythm of the sentence, the poetics of prose. If you look in the art of writing, the art of fiction by John Gardner, which I think is the absolute best uh, guide to writing fiction. He has a whole chapter in there on rhythm and the way, he actually goes through it like it's a poem and gives you an idea of the rhythm of that work. How fast is it? How slow is it? How short are the sentences, etc. So as you fill in that template, you will notice in a way that you probably haven't noticed before. So I do encourage people to write in the manner of other writers, to investigate. Now, there are a lot of people who say, I write in my own style. I don't, never imitate anybody. I never emulate. But normally that is not really true. That there are certain writers whose work we admire when we're young writers, that it's like, God, I would love to write like that. That is my dream writer. If I could write like that, I would be so happy. And then there's a stage of your development where you do emulate them. You can tell, who's in love with what writer when they're early on. It's like, oh God, I have to be Faulkner, and everything is going to look like Faulkner, and it's Faulkner, 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 until it's not. You write your way through that phase. Eventually, the writer that you emulate, if it's one writer, and your own voice will start emerging. And you realize that you're not Faulkner, you're not going to be writing like Faulkner, but there's a flavor still in the soup. He's like the soup bone that went in there. So you don't have to worry that people are going to read it and say, oh, this is so and so. I read Ocean Vuong, and Ocean Vuong studied with a poet, Li Young Lee, in Chicago, who's one of my favorite poets. And you read Ocean Vuong and you hear Li Young Lee a little bit, just a little bit. When you read Li Young Lee, he has a memoir, and I can tell that he's a Dylan Thomas guy because I hear Dylan Thomas little phrases, the way Dylan Thomas will have an adjective and a verb. I mean, an adjective and a noun. He takes a verb and makes an adjective out of it, and that I see that in anybody who has been in workshop with. I was in this workshop with Kate Braverman, and anybody who was in that workshop for any bit of time, there's a little flavor of that in the writing. You'll start to see the sibling relationship. And anybody who studies with a certain um, writer, and a little bit of the flavor of that writer will often be in the writing of a whole group, you know, and maybe it'll surface in different ways. Maybe it'll appear in this person's syntax, it'll appear in this person's vocabulary choices. Um, Maybe the person likes to put lists, and so that will be inherited. Hi, Wendy. That will be inherited. There's a lot of flavors in writing, and I don't think that, what's it called, the agony of influence. People are so terrified that somebody will say they were influenced by someone. Geniuses don't come out of Zeus's forehead. Let me tell you, we stand on the shoulders of giants, and having been influenced is not a sin. It's a flavor. Your teacher used oregano, and you came to kind of like a little oregano in your food. You know, it's more like that. It's a scent. It's a rhythm. And when you have when you do the exercise that I'm talking about, which is to take multiple strong stylists and write your own paragraph based on one of their paragraphs, using the same syntax, the same rhythms, the same syntax, the same um, level of diction, really exploring that. You can do it with multiple different kinds of stylists. Hi, Marie. Yes, I have done writing workshops on this topic, and I might do it again. Um, the Then you get a look at the possibilities, the rhythms, the music of these different writers. So what I've used is uh, I've used when I do my workshop, I use Styron for the long sentence. I use Didion for the short sentence. I use so there's two schools, you can say, in American literature. There's the Faulkner school, the long sentence, or the Hemingway school, the short sentence, the journalist. So people think, the failed journal, you're a failed journalist or failed poet. So Hemingway, the journalist, failed journalist, you know, let's that's how it's described. I don't think he's a failure. And Faulkner, the failed poet. So the long sentence tends to be the Gothic, Joyce Carol Oates, whereas the Hemingway school, short sentences, often screenwriters. Um, Didion is a perfect example of the Hemingway school. Um, so Sarah asks, is the transfer of style from a workshop instructor due more to osmotic influence, to reading, studying their work, or from the workshop feedback, or all of the above? Um, I think it is that you're attracted to working with that person because you were attracted to their work. If it's out of the blue, if you just picked somebody at random from a UCLA writers group or catalog or community of writers offering, um, you will be most affected by the writer that is where you want to go. So you'll pick it up. And also the reward, their approval, their excitement about what you're writing, will be things that they are interested in. They're teaching the things that they are interested in. Um, so it's sort of a combination of the three things, all of the above. Um, I can always tell there's somebody I was in that Braverman workshop with, Les Plesko, who taught for many years at the UCLA Extension. And I can always tell the people who work with Les. I remember teaching up at the community of writers, and I had a group, and one of them I just, the cadences, the way, the rhythms of that writing. It's like, it's strongly rhythmic. And I said, you ought to read Les Plesko. And she said, oh no, I studied with Les. It's like, yeah, 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 you see it. Um, you want to have I don't know. See, now I'm teaching and I have my point of view on this. So we're back into the loop, right? But I like to, for me, style is strong and a strong interest of mine. I want to see a pronounced style. So I like it when I don't even have to I don't even have to see who wrote something. I could read a page of your work if you've been working on style and know who wrote that. I can read a page of Faulkner from any book and go, oh, this is Faulkner, or at least Faulkner-esque. You know, this is Didion. This is Joyce Carol Oates. Um, uh, So GB says Cormac McCarthy openly said he studied Melville and the Bible at great lengths. Also, he liked to read dictionaries, hours on hours. Yeah, I'm sure he did. Cormac McCarthy's, it's interesting because as he, like the snake that eats the whole pig, and it starts, if you read Cormac McCarthy's Suttree, you see the Faulkner. It's like the undigested pig in that book. But as he went on, he started digesting that pig. And so in later books, he has his own style emerges. Um, but there's always that flavor of Faulkner, even though it's not writ large. Melville and the Bible, well, I think Faulkner comes from the Bible as well, uh, and probably Melville too. I haven't read up on Faulkner that deeply, but most of the Southern writers are very strong on the Bible, as is Dylan Thomas. That's a very strong influence in the way the cadences go. Hi, Chris. Good to see you. We're talking about style today and how it's formed and how to work on it. Um, so the question is, do you like to write fiction in the manner of other people? You get so much, you learn so much from taking a paragraph or a page of some noted stylist and see what they're doing. If you take a paragraph of, say, Chandler, is another person I use, he's very good on metaphor, extremely good on metaphor. So stop and write out his and then see how, then try to do it yourself. How high was it? Chandler would say, I would, the end of my foot itched, but my bank account was trying to crawl under a duck. Like, how low was it? It was trying to crawl under a duck. So ask yourself, you know, the end of my foot did what? Wanting to kick somebody. And, but my bank account, blank, and try to get, how low was it? How high was it? And as you work on that um, ability that, hi Amy, as you work on that ability that Chandler had, you strengthen that part of your writing. And it doesn't mean that you're going to end up writing like Chandler in hard-boiled noir, but there will be a flavor. Hi, Alicia, good to see you. There will be that flavor still there. So do not worry about the agony of influence. So the writers that I use in that class, I use Chandler, I use Styron, representing the Faulkner camp. I use Didion, representing the Hemingway camp. Um, I use, who else is in there? I use is it Jean Philippe? Jean Louis Jouvet, Jouvet, for the high style, European, very aristocratic style, which one of the things that drives me absolutely crazy is um, when I read historical fiction. We're talking about Edwardian period, we're talking about, the 19th century, um, and the diction is all wrong. It is so modern. And it's somebody who's never thought about how people thought, how people spoke. The way language was different in that era. And you're not going to contort yourself. I mean, you can read Hilary Mantel's Wolf Hall and all. And she's not like ye oldie whatever. You're not getting all that archaic verbiage, but she retains the flavor of people's interactions, their thoughts, their language from that period. And it especially borrows me. Hi, Llewellyn. It especially bothers me to hear people having aristocrats or Tony people in the 19th century say, um, using you do this, I can't stand it, you always do this, or I always do this, where that in that diction they used one because it was considered inelegant to say I. It's that you're pushing yourself forward, what one does. And one has a whole mess of class commentary, unspoken class commentary behind it. Because when you use what one does and what one doesn't do in the 19th century, say, um, it's not referring to everybody. It's referring to people of one's own class and one's own background because we don't really care. They didn't really care what the guy who grooms the horse or what the guy who digs the garden or the lady who makes the bed. One doesn't include them. One includes people who have been raised like me and people of substance. And so that person, that one, can kick over the traces and do stuff that they know they damn well shouldn't be doing, but they do. But they still know the rules. They know the rules, and so what one does or what doesn't one doesn't do is still applicable. They are not modern people, and they don't think like modern people, and it drives me crazy when the author has not bothered to understand the high style. So it's just clunky, clunky, clunky. There's the castle of my father yonder. That's what it sounds like to me. As somebody who hasn't tried for that kind of elegance. So I use Jouvet. We take a big paragraph of him and try your own language, your own story, your own character in there, but you move through the sentences the way he would. And it opens up, oh my God, that's how you do it, a high style. That isn't that hard. It isn't that hard. I use Fernando del Paso, who is an amazing Mexican um, uh, novelist. He has a book called Palinuro of Mexico that is just, it's like it's like Joyce on ecstasy. It's so joyous and word drunk and lists, and it reminds me of being young. So if I ever feel like if I feel old, like I can't embrace a younger character's energy, I might do this exercise myself with Fernando del Paso. Um, uh, uh, oh God, I'm lost the thread. Um, Palinuro of Mexico, just to refresh that. It's really joyous. I'll use, what else do I use in that class? Let's see, I actually got oh, I use Poe. Try to write, a little Poe paragraph or a page using your own kind of character, but seeing how does Poe ratchet up your anxiety. I mean, he writes horror. So how does he ratchet up your anxiety? That he pushes, um, he holds you off understanding what the sentence is about. There's a lot of phrases that keep you away from the end of the sentence. There's a lot of self-interruption um, that you'll notice if you try to use him as a template. He keeps you away from the end of the sentence. I mean, my dear, would I, your host, and he keeps pushing the actual thing he's trying to say away. That's an anxious character, and it builds anxiety in the sentence. It's a very, very useful thing to do. Who else do I use? Um, it is impersonation of a sort, but all writing is, isn't it? I use Lawrence Durrell from uh, Justine to see what a truly artistic writing is like. It just uses a lot of synesthesia. It's tremendously sensual writing, and that's really good for us um, to see how that goes. And I use Cormac McCarthy, absolutely, and I use later Cormac McCarthy, so you can see what it's like not to do interiors. The language is very plain, purposefully plain. So he's outgrown his florid Faulknerian. He's digested the pig. Um, but um, and he uses a very plain language. He doesn't use dependent clauses. He uses just conjunctions, rather than da da da, comma, because, blah, 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 comma, when, blah, 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 using prepositions. He uses just, I went to the barn and I took out the horse and I loaded up the pack, and, we put the dead guy on the third horse. And think about when you write that, then think about, you'll notice as you're writing how that bends your subject matter, because that kind of writing is good for something. And the exercise I use for that is you have the character is about to kill somebody or wreak mayhem, um, and you don't refer to what they're about to do. You have them just go to the drugstore and buy some stuff. And in the refusal to internalize, it offers such a gravity to everything that character is doing, because they know that they're going to go kill that guy. But first, they're going to buy some stuff. And you never have to refer to what they're about to do. And it's so heightens the drama. So GB says style might be defined as the lens through which one sees the world. Yeah, I mean, yes, it's like what you notice, but it's more embodied than that. It's the rhythm, the breath you take, the rhythm, the level of diction, how high or low this is going to be, how long the sentence is, how lyrical or how staccato. It's musical. It's more musical than that. Um, Sarah says, at what point did you feel like you had fully found your own style? I think it changes with each book a bit, because subject matter also has its um, influence. I think I think White Oleander was strongly um, poetic. My second novel, lyrical, certain kind of sound, of rhythm. Second novel was a punk rock novel, so more staccato, um, more abrasive, more in your face, little less. Um, it's yeah, a little less time, a little more um, shock, a little more corners. The Russian novel was also a poet, but an extremely well educated girl, um, and a very excitable person. So a little more on the vehement side, more on the how would I how would I characterize that? A little more on the Palanur of Mexico side, exuberant and poetic and dramatic. Um, and then my fully found my own. I have older characters in the book I'm writing now, so there's a bit more humor. There's a bit more playfulness in the language with this one because I think older people, interesting older people anyway, have a more, and this is apropos of your question, GB, about the lens through which you see the world, that these older people have more, a little bit more distance, a little bit more of a sense of humor, much more of a sense of humor because they've been through stuff and they survived it. But also, I have a character with a very sharp temper, much more so than anything I've written before. And that also comes across very strongly. So that stylistically is going to be another flavor in the mix. Um, so you'll have to see how that uh, how that boils, what that's like, how that tastes once I get it served up. Wendy says, would it be wrong to use various styles in a short story collection? I don't think it's wrong, but I think that it would be like an artist trying to sell a gallery on, I mean, this is just on the practical side, okay? I'm not saying should or shouldn't. I'm just saying on the practical side, think of an artist approaching a gallery. Oh, you like my trash truck? I don't know if you can hear it, but it always comes by on Wednesdays. Um, think of a gallery and an artist comes in and their work is all over the place. There's collages, there's rugs, there's paintings, there's drawings, there's abstract, there's representational, and a gallery would look at that and say, I don't know who this is. I don't know who this is. It doesn't hang together. It's not a show here. I don't know what I can do for you because there will be nothing associated with, if the artist Jane Doe, there's nothing associated with Jane Doe that that an art collector can say, okay, that's what they're doing. So the same thing with the collection. The more varied the styles uh, of a collection, the less a agent or an editor can understand who you are. You know, I mean, are they Faulkner? Are they Didion? Are they, I mean, are they, a long sentence, a short sentence? Are they, lyrical? Are they, quippy? Are they modern? Are they, you know, elegant, high diction, 19th century? Um, it would be a very difficult sale. All of this work of developing a style is important. It will be important to you to develop a recognizable style. I'm just saying you can't do it out of thin air. You have to start somewhere, examine it, explore it, just, and then decide, after having written some Didion pages yourself and after writing some Joyce Carol Oates stuff yourself, some Cormac McCarthy stuff yourself, then you think, okay, what am I writing about? What is most suitable to what I'm writing? What felt most organic? You will, when you do a bunch of these exercises of doing other people's working, using them as a template, you will see for yourself. It's like, oh, this is what suits me. This was very natural. This I had to tie myself in knots to do his style. But to do this style is a pleasure, and I just feel it so strongly. You're starting to narrow down where you're really coming from. So Wendy, Alicia says, check out Trust Me by John Updike. Similar themed stories, but stylistically very different. Well, that's interesting. I'll check that out too. Um, and Sarah says, I feel like authors are often asked about their writing influences, but not always asked of who they might have dialed into for a particular book. That's interesting. There's a couple of different things when you look at writers' influences. When they talk about it, often it'll be people that you go, really? Them? It will be very confusing that somebody, that writer A will say that they were strongly influenced by writer B growing up, and you're going like, what? Like Don DeLillo and Tarzan of the Apes. It's like, but on some hidden level, there was a transfer of energy there. There was something that we may not be able to see. It's a very strange question to ask a writer, um, but interesting. Writing influences. I tend to go towards what you would call lineage masters. Like, who's your lineage? So I could say, um, major influences being, this person, and then who were their influences, and then who were their influences, and then who were their influences. So for me, I would say, my lineage would probably start with Dostoevsky and Dickens. And Dickens, and the interesting thing is, Dostoevsky was influenced by not the Russians. He was influenced by Poe and Dickens. So you have Poe and Dickens, Dostoevsky. Then I would say I'd go right to Faulkner from Dostoevsky, that long sentence, um, and heightened reality. And then I'd go from Faulkner to Joyce Carol Oates. Again, the long sentence, very gritty, um, lyrical writing. And then kind of another strain of it would be the Miller Nin strain to the Beats, to um, Kate Braverman, who was my teacher. So there's sort of an overlap there. Um, uh, let's see. Uh, GB says, when one lives in a foreign country and has to learn and speak another language, one begins to see and hear the world differently. Absolutely. And then there are certain writers who write in their adopted language. They don't write in their home language. Some people have to write in their home language and then be translated. But there are some who write in their adopted language, and that's very interesting. Like Nabokov, he was trilingual from the get go. So I don't know that English was really his third language, but he writes, his English is very much inflected by his Russian and his French. Um, he plays with language in a way that a native speaker would not. So that's interesting too. Um, Somebody is writing in Italian who kind of adopted Italian, Italy, Italian, Italy. It'll come to me. Pardon the pun. Alicia says, Janet, we just want to check out your library card. No way could you own all those books like that. So Wendy says the workshop that she had taken with me, the style workshop, really helped with the voices of different characters also, especially with the first point of view. And Sarah says, I think Janet owns quite a few books. Yeah, I do. I do. I used to be a completist. I have to have all the Faulkner, all the Dostoevsky. And in later years, I figure I can always go to the library. Um, so I took out I kept the books that I read and reread, and then release the ones that I can find anywhere. Um, so Jill says, I think my writing has been influenced by poetry and my journalism background. Absolutely. Um, the journalists tend to be less lyrical, shorter sentence, um, a little bit less introverted, less internalized. Poets are excellent on the sound of words and strong on images, metaphors, and so on. So Llewellyn said Beckett with French. You thought, oh, that's right, because Beckett's first language was English and he decided to write in French. That is absolutely true. I'm trying to think of the Italian. Somebody now who is writing in Italian moved to Italy. Maybe a Russian. I should think of that. Um, so this is another one. Same. We're talking about writing. These were the questions from the week from the internet. Um, if you had to describe your writing style to anyone, how would you do it? And that's just something you need to write down right now. If you had to describe your writing style to someone else, how would you describe it? You can do comparisons. It's like if Dostoevsky and if Poe and Dickens had a child who was Russian and conservative, you know, and overwrought and in debt, who would they be? Dostoevsky. If two writers had a love child, who would you be? And why? The why is every bit as important as the who, because it shows that you understand what kind of a writer you are. Um, was Nin, Anais Nin, her first language French, Spanish, or English? Her first language, let's see, the parents were Spanish speaking. So my guess is that Spanish was her first language. They lived in France. They moved to America when she was 9 or 10, and she spoke no English. So English was her last language, but she wrote in English. So that's interesting. It has a very French feel to it, her English. Um, there are a lot of overtones. But this is a good exercise is if you had to describe your writing style to anybody, how would you do it? Um, what kind of music would it be? If you had to accompany that book with a song, with music, what music would it be? Do you write a long sentence? Do you like a short sentence? What's your vocabulary like? Um, uh, is it imagistic? Is it sensual? Um, if if you have trouble, it's not a necessary exercise, but it will help you think of yourself in as part of this conversation. That, oh, do I have a style? Do I try? Do I, you know, how would somebody else describe my style? Um, and sometimes people come up with things that are kind of, what do they call it in television? Aspirational. You know, you see, oh, I see myself as a cross between Melville and, you know, Joan Didion. It's like, wow, that's an aspiration. I can't picture it, but good. Uh, but then it's it's trying to absorb those influences, and usually first you swallow the pig and everything you do sounds like Hemingway or sounds like David Foster Wallace. But eventually you digest the pig and it's not as prominent or problematic. Eventually it is you, but it takes a little exploration. Um, so I would describe my writing style. Each book is a little bit different from my point of view, but from the reader's point of view, I suspect that the reader would read all of my books and be able to take a page out of any of them left on the desk and go, oh, yeah, that's Janet Fitch's, or it sounds like Janet Fitch. Um, so I guess I do have a style after all. So hi, Hope. I'm sorry you come in right at the end. We're wrapping up here. Um, but I welcome you to come next week. Uh, Next week. I am going to be out of town next week um, at a um, wedding. So probably Thursday. I'll do Wednesday. I'll do Thursday for Writing Wednesday and noon on Thursday next, and usually at noon Wednesday, 3 Eastern, every Wednesday, answering your questions. So send me questions and give these styles a try. So GB says the writers, a team of two who wrote the script for Bonnie and Clyde, played LPs of music from the era like Flat and Scruggs over and over again as they pounded out their script. I do hope this will be archived, so as soon as I'm off, you'll be able to see it from the beginning. But I welcome you next time, and thank you all for joining me here. This was fun, and write well, and we'll see you next time. Okay, thanks.